Everybody to today's seminar. So we have today Pedro Romero. He is a postdoc at the EBD, and he has a lot of experience with doing different field expeditions around the globe. And he has been working with mainly with parrots. He did his PhD at the University of Pablo de Olavide, and he is going to share some information about wild pets in the Neotropics. So, Pedro, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming. As my colleagues already introduced myself, I am currently working in EBD as postdoc, and the talk I'm bringing you today is kind of divulgative about a lot of results and data we were collecting during my PhD time in Pablo de Olavide, and link it also with EBD and also during my postdoc. So to briefly introduce a little bit the topic, as you may know, human activities are generating a biodiversity loss process that is quite important. Several activities like deforestation, habitat loss, overexploitation of resources, climate change, or even invasive species are really important, but I'm going to talk about a specific one that is wildlife trade, and in particular illegal wildlife trade that is also a driver of biodiversity loss to different purposes, like for example traditional medicine or human consumption to keep animals as pets in the houses. And in fact, illegal wildlife trade is considered now the 5th most lucrative criminal activity or business in the world. A few years ago, it was even the 3rd, just after drugs or weapons. And to see some numbers, from 2015 to 2021, around 4,000 species were traded illegally, 140,000 seizures or by police or authorities, 13 million items confiscated from 162 countries, with an outcome of $20 billion per year. This just came the report this year. And of course, this will have some important implications for conservation. If we look at for example, in this graph from Sheffers and collaborators, we can see that around 20% of vertebrates are being traded. And a big percentage of them, they are undertreated. According to the UCN categories, if we look at mammals or birds, it can be around 50%. And that can have really important implications, because if we think, I don't know if you know this movie that is real, it's about a parrot that is the last of his species. It's not other individuals from his species, but this movie is actually based on a real story that is on this species of parrot that is the Spix macaw, that is extincted in the wild now because of a combination of habitat loss and illegal trade. And in fact, the last individuals of the species were captured for keep it as pet. So with this, we can make an idea of how important this activity is for conservation. But we can talk also about different kinds of illegal trade. Not all the illegal trade is equal. And we can, for example, talk in a bigger scale, we have international trade. This is what we have more information about. It is what most part of people know. If we think about rhino horns, elephants, pangolins, all of this is about this. And the trade routes for this kind of illegal trade are well known. We know where the individuals are coming from and where they are exported to. And we have also some estimates about it. They can be more accurate or less, but we have it. And actually, there is organizations worldwide that are in charge of control this trade, and also to provide freely this information about the number of species and individuals that are traded annually. But we have a different scale of illegal trade that we call domestic, that this is what happens on a smaller scale. For example, if we think locally or inside a country, it's not illegal trade that is meant for export to other countries, it's meant to stay there. And this kind of trade is less known, is quite overlooked, and we have important gaps in data. And for example, if we look where I was working with my research team in the Neotropics, both kind of traits are present, but they are not equal, they have differences. International trade was reduced during the last decades, especially due to a ban of importation from the European Union and the USA that didn't allow to bring wild-caught animals in these countries, mostly due to health security reasons. But still ongoing, focused on certain valuable species and with other country of destination. For example, now certain species are going to China for the market of traditional medicine, and jaguars are being exported for the bones in substitution of tigers that they are getting really scarce and they are really valuable for the medicine market in China. But for example, the domestic is different. It's culturally rooted, so it's present across the whole Neotropics, is distributed in all the countries. It's not limited only to valuable species, and as I said before, it's quite overlooked. We don't know much about it. And for example, an example is parrots. Parrots are traded for being kept as pet in the houses, and it's quite common to find them in the Neotropics. When I was talking about that it's a rooted tradition, I'm talking about something that is not from now. It comes from really old times. Even it can be tracked to the pre-Columbian empires. For example, the Aztec or the Inca already has wild animals as pets. And for example, from this article that was made by Capriles and collaborators, they were able to identify even trade routes coming from Amazonia, bringing species of parrots from the Amazonia basin to several cities that were located in different parts of the Andes. And this is still going today. This is pictures that we took with our research group. It's common image that you can find in several countries in South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. It's people who are still having parrots as pets in the houses, but not only parrots, also other groups, like for example mammals. Like for example this lady that is having a sloth as a baby with a pullover, or for example a paca that is getting with a leash like a dog. That's quite common to see. But that is common doesn't mean that it's something that is allowed. It's illegal. It's a legal activity. And actually it's forbidden in all the countries of the Neotropics to keep wild animals as pets, with the exception of two countries, Guyana and Suriname, that they still allowing today to keep as pets some species and also to eat them. But despite this illegal, in the other countries that is not allowed, we can find these markets, for example. Wildlife markets that we know, for example, with COVID, with the wet markets in Asia, are quite common to sell parts of animals for human consumption or for traditional medicine, or even ornamental or alive animals for the pet trade. Most part of information we have from domestic illegal wildlife trade in the Neotropics come from these markets. But even the studies that make these studies on the markets think that they can represent only 3% of the amount of illegal trade that is happening at the domestic level. So we are not seeing really the problem. So one thing we were asking ourselves is how widespread is real now this activity of keeping wild animals as pets in the Neotropics. So to do that, we decided to perform surveys in the Neotropics. We finally covered more than around 15 countries in 12 years. The last year we have information is 2023. We finally covered more or less 50,000 kilometers of roads, covering different rural areas and going to visit these localities. In total, more than 2,800 localities. And what we found that we can see in the map represented with the black dots is that many of these localities we visit, they were having wild pets in the houses. In total, we find 6,600 houses where having wild pets on the house. This may not look a lot for the Neotropical scale, but it's important because from the old localities we surveyed in the rural areas, the 95% they were having wild pets in some of the houses. So it's quite widespread activity and it's quite common. Also we find around 10,000 individuals from 2,074 species. And despite the majority of them, they were birds and the majority parrots, because it's really, really common as pet, we also found other species that may be, as you will see later, more problematic, like, for example, mammals or reptiles. And for example, the methodology we did is not really complicated, because we were not knocking every door in every house, in every locality. We were just driving on the street or walking on the street, and we just noted what we saw from the street. So animals are exposed, clearly exposed to people. Everybody that can goes there, if they pay attention, they can see they have a parrot hiding somewhere close to the house, together with chickens or other animals, and it's easy to spot them. But we also have to think that we are talking about keeping pets. It's not like keeping pets here in Europe, or we are not, they are not keeping them in good conditions. They are keeping them in really bad conditions. And we know that because we see it, but also asking questions to people, as you will see, they keep them in really small cages. Sometimes they keep several individuals together in these cages that you are seeing in the picture that is taken in Suriname. They don't have any surveillance from health. There are no vets that check in these animals. They are in contact with poultry, with chickens or other domestic animals, sometimes together in the same cages. Sometimes, for example, as you can see in this picture, in a bar, where the two parrots are on the kind of table where people is going to eat or drink, and the chickens are around as well. They are in bars. They are inside the bar as well with people. They are in markets, as I explained before, but they are on top of the food. They are eating the food that the people is selling to other people. They are also sharing a lot of space with the owners. And as you see, some of them, they look that they are free, that they can fly away, but most part of them, they cannot go away in the case of parrots, for example, because they cut the feathers. As you can see with the red arrow, it's indicated where they cut the top of the feathers so the animals cannot escape. But this, they will recover, and eventually they will grow again. And if they don't do it, some of them, they are free, and they can fly and come back or moving around. But not only we count the things that we saw, but we also try to speak to the owners if we could. And with this, we also extract some information. This is something that we call informal interviews, because we don't have to forget that this is a legal activity, so it's not legal. We cannot do normal questionnaires or something, because it's strange, and maybe people is not prone to tell you things. So what we do is informal interviews. We talk to people normally. For example, here we are talking to a lady who has a parakeet on the shoulder, and we were asking questions about her parakeet. But also, we try to, in every locality we visit, to at least perform a minimum of random questions to random people on the street, asking them two main questions. Do you have parrots, or do you know somebody who has parrots in their houses? And do you yourself have or had parrots in the past? And 30 to 70%, depending on the country, they say they have or had pets. They acknowledge that they have wild pets. And 50 to 90, also depending on the country, they know somebody in the area who has pets. So we are only seeing a small part of probably what is on these localities. And also asking these questions, we were able to know that most part of them, when we ask the origin, they don't come from these markets. They don't come from these wildlife markets. They come from people trapping themselves in the wild, or both locally to neighbors or to other people. So actually, these studies, they were talking about 3% is maybe only represented by markets. In our case, it was even lower. It was 1% were coming just from the markets. And asking about the people who don't have it anymore, the pets, they were lost recently, we could know that from the answers of the people, they think, or they say, that 30% they were escaped. They came back to the wild, according to them. And around 70%, they died. And from the ones they died, if we ask them why, they say in most part of cases, half of the cases, it was by disease. They believe their pets were sick. In 37% of the cases, they say that it was predated by animals, mostly cats and dogs. In this case, maybe they will know because they saw it. And 15% due to different kind of accidents. that you may imagine I put a car because in some cases they are taken by cars because they are on the middle of the road, that these macaws are just walking on Peru. Also, we knew that they have a short life. And they have a short life because, for example, for large species of parrot, most part of them, they have a median age of 1 or 2, the ones that were alive in the houses. And for smaller species, 3 months. But this is a really short life for parrots because when we look at large species, they can live more than 60 years. In fact, we know a case, we have a parrot that has at least 70 years. And for the smaller, up to 10 years. So this really they are not living a lot in the houses of people. And on the other hand, we also find exotic species there. Most part of them, what we find is native, trapped in the wild illegally. But we also find exotic species that they are bought legally. It's not really common in the Neotropics yet, but it's growing business. People breed exotic species in facilities, and then they sell it to people. We were able to identify more than 1,500 individuals from 24 species, mostly parrots again. And in some cases, we find it together mixed with native species in the same cages and even to sold with native species. So to resume a little bit, this is just about illegal wildlife trade. We know it's widespread, and we know it has conservation implications, or we can imagine it will have even more than we thought. But there is other risk linked to illegal trade. For example, I don't know if you know this image. This is Ebola virus. So maybe with that you can get a clue what I'm talking about. This zoonosis. So illegal wildlife trade is one of the activities that is linked to a really public health concern, that is zoonosis. If we look at this graph, we can see that, for example, there is a lot of species that they are being traded, that they are host from several pathogens. The purple color indicates the amount of species that are involved in trade. So many species are traded, and many species can be host of zoonotic virus, even with a high richness. And I don't really want to look carefully to this graph because there's a lot of information, but it represents the zoonotic diseases that has importance in the last decades. And for example, if we focus on just 3 of them that I think most of you know, HIV, Ebola, or Marburg, it can be really linked to some illegal trade activities related. For example, bushmeat, that is to hunt animals in the wild to eat it or to sell it in markets. And for example, this picture I bring you is from a recent outbreak that is happening right now in Congo. It's a picture I took myself a month ago. And it's a panel advertising about the problematic of the monkeypox. Monkeypox is one of these zoonoses that is linked to bushmeat activities. People hunt the primary host, mostly rodents species, or monkeys that are incidental hosts. They get infected by blood drops or other fluids. Also in the markets with all this meat that they are sold to people, it's not really good conditions. So when infection comes to humans, then they can pass it to humans. Now it's going, actually 13 million cases by now and 500 deaths, mostly kids. So it's really public health concern. But if we look closely to last month, in the capital of Rwanda, they have an outbreak of another virus that I told you before is Marburg. Marburg, for the ones you don't know, is like Ebola. It has similar symptoms and is really deadly. And this outbreak is supposed to be generated by some people who went to hunt for fruit bats and sell it in the capital. So now it's 66 cases, 15 deaths, and we have to pay attention to it. But if we look even closely to this week, this happens. This is in Congo. A new mystery disease appeared. It's killing dozens of people. We don't know the origin. We don't know what is it. It's like kind of flu. But what we know for the area is originated is probably related to bushmeat, to illegal wildlife trade. So all these examples actually are coming from Africa. Africa is a hotspot for emerging of this zoonosis. Asia as well. But what happens in the Neotropics? Actually, in the Neotropics, the same activities that are present in Africa that originated these diseases are also present. In Africa, it's possible to find people who still hunt monkeys for bushmeat consumption. These are not images from Neotropics, but it's to illustrate a little bit how it works. People just go hunting, take the monkeys, sell it in markets, and in all this process, you can get infected with pathogens that are present on these animals. But the thing is, even though keeping wild animals as pets is considered less risky than bushmeat practices, the truth is that the same host species that they are risk, for example, rodents or monkeys, are present. And they have close contact with people during long periods of time. They are living with them during months, years, wherever the animal lives. So that can make it risky, especially taking into account that even if we don't know where outbreak of a zoonosis is going to be produced, and even if we don't really know where is all the pathogens that are present, what we know is usually they will follow the similar pattern that for richness that other groups, latitudinal pattern that make richer in the tropics. But for some studies, we know that the mammalian reservoirs, Neotropics is a hotspot. It means that there is a lot of mammals that can act as a reservoir for pathogens, and there is a lot of undiscovered pathogens that can be transmitted. And also, we play with other factors that make it really risky. That, for example, the Amazonia or other areas of the Neotropics are experiencing habitat loss process, and people really get close to untouched areas that make it more risky. The population is growing really fast, even in areas close to these forests or untouched areas. They are building many roads that they make access between these localities faster and more easy, and also contact with infected people or infected animals. And despite bushmeat apparently is getting reduced, not the practice of keeping wild animals. And as I told you, parrots are the most common animal in the wildlife market for pets in the Neotropics, but they are not really prone to or risky to transmit pathogens to humans, first of all, because they are birds, they are not monkeys or rodents, that they are more close to us. But making a review, we could see that there is at least 40 pathogens that are important for wildlife, 30 pathogens for poultry, and they can even transmit 20 pathogens for humans that they are the medical concern. Maybe not to make a big outbreak, for example, at Ebola, but this is already happening, and they are transmitting diseases that they are making people sick, people die. So something to consider. And if we don't focus only on human health, there is other risks, for example, for livestock. About COVID, that was really talked about, these wet markets in Asia. This wet markets is problematic because livestock is in close contact with wild animals. They can get infected with different diseases, transmitted to each other. And actually from Asia, we know that several zoonoses were coming from these wet markets. But these wet markets are also present in the Neotropics. So it means it's not something exclusively to the Asia. We know that they are also present in Neotropical areas. And there is another thing. There is the houses of people are acting actually like a special of small-scale wet markets, because poultry is constantly in contact with wild animals that they are taking year by year, because when they die after 1 year, they go and collect another. So a lot of wild animals are coming to the houses in contact with poultry. So that makes a risk activity. And it's not only important for public health, but it's also important like for economy and other things, because if we look at the current outbreak of avian flu in the USA cow farms, we can see that already more than 500 farms were infected in 15 states. It means that these farms have to shut down. They cannot sell the milk because people get infected by the milk, apparently. So it's something to consider. And the last piece is zoonoses are also a problem for wildlife. I mean, zoonoses are coming from wildlife, but when they appear in an area or in a group of species that they were not present before, they can generate a problem. For example, these are images from the seabird colonies in Scotland, specifically gannets. In 2021, from cameras, you can see that it's mostly covered on these white things, these are the gannets breeding. You can see images from June 2022, where it's mostly lacking this white there, is because it was a massive death of seabirds due to avian flu. But this didn't stop there. It spread across different areas, and it came to infect even other groups, like for example, mammals. When they infect mammals, these are images from the coast from Peru to Argentina. A lot of sea lions were dead, and when they looked, they were infected by avian influenza. In total, they account for 30,000 deaths of sea lions, with a 97% of mortality of the pups. So that's quite important. And this is something that can happen also with illegal trade, also with moving livestock that is infected, but also moving animals infected. And in fact, these animals that they are kept as pets, they come from the wild, they can get infected by poultry from diseases that were not present for the species or in the native area, and they can be infected by exotic species. As we see, they are also present. And then, if eventually they escape, they can infect also native populations. And if we look a particular case that they are, again, parrots, parrots can carry, as we say, 40 pathogens that are important for wildlife, mostly for birds. And for example, in the picture, we can see Newcastle disease or beak and feather. That is a disease that affects the birds, make malformation on the feathers, and is quite important for birds if they infect native populations. And Newcastle disease is present in exotic species that they are finding in the Neotropics, and they are also finding in poultry. If they get in contact with this native species that they are kept as pets, and as we saw, around 30%, according to the people, they can escape to the wild, eventually we could have an outbreak of these diseases in the wild with important conservation implications. So just to finish with that, illegal wildlife trade is important by itself because it has conservation implications by itself. But also we have to think about zoonosis as a public health problem and how illegal trade can be involving on the appearance of these outbreaks of new diseases. And illegal trade of animal keeping of wild animals as pets is facilitating maybe this cross-transmission between different actors, like for example poultry, even humans or wild animals, exotic animals as well. And if these wild pets escape again to the wild, they can transmit these diseases to the native population. So it's also a conservation problem, further than a public health concern. And the Neotropics, for different characteristics, is a perfect scenario for this to happen. So this is that it didn't happen yet, doesn't mean that it's not going to happen in the future if we don't take some measures, like for example, start to see what these pets are having as diseases, like health surveillance, and explaining to people as well that is not something that they should do. And if you want to know more about this is published as, in People and Nature as a perspective, and also several divulgation media like the conversation. So if you want to know more about it, or just asking me. So thanks a lot to everybody for coming.
So thank you, Pedro, for this talk and this worrying topic. So I'm sure that there will be questions for him. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Pedro. It was an amazing talk, super important talk, the things to get in common. Like, I have two questions. One of them is, in these places, or places where, did they have cattle? Or did they consume the meat by poaching because they didn't have cattle? So it's the meat source, the local meat source is poaching in the wild.
It really depends on the area. For example, if we talk about Africa, in several areas they don't have cattle. Mostly they hunt because it's what they can do. Sometimes they have some chickens or something, but it's, for example, in Central Africa, in these equatorial jungles, it's quite common that they hunt because they don't have cattle. Mm-hmm. In the Neotropics, it depends. There's areas that they have many cattle, there's no problem. They have cow consumption farms, but in certain areas, for example, more close to the jungles, they can hunt because it's a resource that is for free. Instead of having to buy the meat, you go and you take it yourself. So it's why several people are still hunting, for example, all these species.
And the other question is, all these areas that may have poaching problems are able to support cattle, because introducing cattle in certain places is also a risk for biodiversity. So it's a question of risk control, of controlling the various problems. So you may put cattle there and you may develop the area, but it will become a problem in time. So it's a tricky question.
Yeah, in fact, for example, in Congo, they are having a problem with introduced cattle because it dies. For example, pigs are dying with several diseases, cows, they are not surviving. But for example, in Neotropics, if you look at Amazonia, they are just cutting the forest to have a big amount of cows. So apparently it's not a problem. But it may be if they get closer in the jungle, but we don't know.
Okay, thank you.
More questions? Okay. Well, in the meantime, I have one question. So it's, for me, it's like super difficult to control this. So even if it is illegal, how could you monitor this, how, like the wild pets that are in the Neotropics? How could you, are you taking, for example, it's like the government is somehow monitoring this issue, or just give it, okay, this is illegal, people know that it's an illegal thing, but they are not doing anything at the, so there are like a police that is looking for this, or they are checking something, or you don't have, or there is not enough resources to do this, I guess. So
it's many differences. For example, in Brazil, they decided to do it in police way. So they have a military corps of police that they are meant to control this, and they are really, really well armed and this. So in Brazil, they try to do this way, but it's not working. For example, in areas like Costa Rica, they decided to implement other things like ecotourism, that apparently is working better because people start to at least know that it's a legal activity, or they have information all the time that it's not possible to do that. And apparently it's working better than, for example, living in Brazil with heavy weapons. The problem is authorities, they destinate money to control this, but in some areas it's difficult, it's not working. There are isolated areas, it's not really big area. Police, maybe they are not doing what they supposed to do because they are not well paid. So in fact, it's difficult to control, but most part of the cases, the biggest problem is people don't know that it's illegal. They make some studies, they make interviews with people, and they even don't know what they are doing is not allowed, because nobody tells them that it's not allowed. So I think also maybe environmental education will help.
more questions?
Found that the lifespan in captivity was really quite low for a lot of parrot species. What's interesting is that usually captivity, like the general pattern across vertebrates, is that captivity extends lifespan rather than restricts it. So I just, like, if you can't stop people doing it, is there a way of improving welfare so that it's like they're at least surviving a bit longer, and like if you can't stop it, is there a way of like promoting longer, like longevity or something like that, or maybe it doesn't matter, I don't know.
Yeah, actually this is quite interesting because it's what you say, usually they will supposed to live longer in captivity, but the thing is they have such a bad conditions, especially in areas like Bolivia, right, that they don't live longer than 1 year. And it's because they feed them with, for example, parrots with chicken. I mean, parrots don't eat chicken, and they get sick and they die. One thing that they are trying in an area of Brazil is a project pilot, is to tell people how they have to feed, for example, their parrots. But it's quite controversial because it's a legal activity. Yeah. They are not supposed to have parrots in the first time. Yeah. But the thing, if they have parrots that they live 1 year and then they come back to the wild and they take another parrot, maybe it's worth that to have a parrot that lives in good conditions 60 years. Exactly, yeah. So it means that you will have only one parrot for the rest of your life, instead of one parrot each year. So they are trying things like that because a lot of times it's just because of they are not feeding them well, they are not taking care well of them, and to feed is easy. It's just to give them fruit that you have a wide variety of fruits available instead of giving the same food as you are eating.
More questions? Okay, so as the audience is not very participating today, I think that we will finish a little bit earlier. And see you all next week. Just a little announcement. Next week is going to be Copita on Thursday. So we have a speaker for that day, but we will try to manage to change the hour, the time of the seminar in order to not overlap with the other event. Okay, so we will announce it next week, but just to let you know that the time will change, but it will be the same day.
It'll be before the Copita. Just to say, we're not going to do it later.
Okay, so thank you everybody for coming, and thank you, Pedro.